want us to look at November 2015, question number 5. Today in the morning, we want to look at what we call forensic investigations, forensic investigators, forensic investigations. So I'm reading the question. I want us to read this question together. They are telling us there that you are a manager in an audit. Listen there. So you should own up your answers as you write. So I would do this and this if there are procedures. So you are the audit manager in an audit firm and doubles up as the head of the forensic investigations department. Your audit firm has recently been appointed for the auditors of Afro Manufacturers Limited for the year ending 31st December 2015. The directors of Afro Manufacturing Limited have contacted your audit firm regarding a suspected fraud relating to the company's payroll. So it's a payroll fraud scheme. It's a payroll fraud scheme. You have been assigned to undertake a forensic investigations and have held the preliminary discussions with the finance director of the company. The finance director suspects that the accountant who had been absent from work after the finance director queried the increasing cost of overtime and the casual workers' payments could be involved in some fraudulent activities. So they want us to do 3 things there, to describe 3 objectives of our forensic investigations. Describe 3 objectives of a forensic investigation. Number 2, to explain the procedure you would follow to gather evidence on the suspected payroll fraud. Number 3, assess how the code of ethics for professional accountants should be used in the process of the forensic investigation service to African Manufacturers Limited. Manufacturers Limited. So really, this is a question that I should be able to get 100%. 100%, all the marks there should be home. Should be home and be home for that matter very easily. So then I have some document that I would want to share with you first of all here, and then we get to discuss. Of course, we are 100% ATD, CPA, CS, CFFE, college, 100% virtual. We don't have a physical presence. So here we are. What are forensic investigations? We are being told that a forensic investigation is a process whereby a forensic accountant carries out procedures to gather evidence which could ultimately be used in legal proceedings or to settle some disputes. So when you talk of forensic investigations, ladies and gentlemen, I would want you to underscore the word forensic. Forensic means what here? To be used in a court of law. For purposes of what here, of course, determination of disputes. So at the end of the day, if you're doing a forensic investigation, your final output, you as the forensic investigator will find itself in some court of law. You'll be there as a witness. In this case, you're providing this paper, right? Another paper, right? Trying in this case here to pin down some fraudsters. So we talk of forensic investigations. This is just like this normal audit. However, here there is a fraud that is being involved that you are trying to uncover as a forensic investigator. As a forensic investigator. Forensic means what here? Courts. Now, so I'm repeating again because this is quite a very, in this case here, common area in your exams. A forensic investigation is that process whereby a forensic accountant carries out procedures to gather what here? Evidence. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to pin down these fraudsters in a court of law, you must have what we call sufficient, appropriate evidence. So the evidence you gather must be of high quality, which could ultimately be used in legal proceedings or to settle some disputes. e.g. fraud or money laundering cases. So this is very common. What are the major objectives of a forensic investigation? The objectives. So the first objective there is to decide if a fraud actually took place. If a fraud actually took place. You know, at times, ladies and gentlemen, the owners of the business, the directors in this case here may suspect some fraud scheme, right? So they look at this person, they think that this person for sure has been stealing. You see, there is a possibility that this person has not been stealing. In office, we've got what we call office politics. We get always people trying to badmouth others in these various organizations. So if there is these allegations, it will be very important for you to get a forensic, for example, investigator, depending, of course, on the magnitude of the fraud that you're suspecting, right? So give a forensic investigator this job. So his first objective will be to determine whether indeed there is a fraud or there isn't one. So that's a first objective, to determine whether fraud actually occurred, because in some cases, it's not a fraud. Number two, discover then who engaged in this fraud. Discover the perpetrators of the fraud, and ultimately to assist in their prosecution in a court of law, right? Number three, to quantify the financial loss. If you are a forensic investigator, at the end of the day, you just don't tell us that there was fraud, that Mr. So-and-so was involved, that in this case, at the end of the day, you have to tell us, fine, this payroll scheme has been happening. This payroll fraud scheme has been happening, and up to date, we suspect that you've lost over 30 million Kenya shillings. So you must be able to quantify the financial loss. And then lastly, then, you have to produce evidence. So the other objective is to produce evidence which is sufficient and relevant enough to be used to assist in legal work here, in legal proceedings. So ladies and gentlemen, amongst these objectives that I've given you there, which objectives of forensic investigation will you never forget? Please try typing there. Which objectives of forensic investigations will you never forget? So as I wait for you to type there, remember fraud has become very big it's actually globally, right? Globally. You'll hear of very many fraud cases, and that is why forensic investigations, forensic auditing, ladies and gentlemen, is now becoming what here is now becoming a major thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, like I can see there, to decide if fraud actually took place, I love that. But remember, whenever you were asked to describe or rather to give objectives, you must start with the word to always. So to decide if a fraud actually took place, and then somebody has given me something here, right? To provide evidence to be used in a court of law, right? To determine if fraud actually took place, that already have had it many times. Also, how that one I've had it many times. To provide evidence to be used in a court of law, great. To quantify the financial loss. To quantify the financial loss, I love that. To quantify the financial loss, I love that. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, the other objective of this forensic investigation that is quite important, which you guys should also be able to remember, is to provide recommendations. You provide recommendations as to the fraud that happened, the weaknesses in internal controls that were exploited, so that in future, the same may not be repeated. So to provide recommendations to who? To management regarding how the fraud took place. And of course, whatever recommendations you give will be pertaining to the weaknesses that were exploited. And of course, now given your recommendations, then the management will be able to do what you have to put in place adequate internal controls regarding that fraud scheme to ensure that the same does not happen in the future. Very, very important. Very, very important. We have another very important, in this case, ladies and gentlemen, objective here, which is to discover the perpetrators. These fraudsters, we need to bring them to book. We need to bring them to book. Great. Now, from there, we have here procedures of accepting a forensic investigation. Procedures of accepting a forensic investigation. So if, for example, ladies and gentlemen, today you are Howard and Associates. So Howard and Associates has been auditing, for example, this particular company that they called Afrokeen. You've been doing the normal audit there. And then there is some payroll fraud scheme that has been discovered in the company that, of course, is allegedly been happening in that company. So the directors in this case here come and approach you, tell you, how, hey, please come and take this particular what here, this particular exercise called forensic investigations. Then what should Howard do? Should you just rush and start doing these investigations besides your normal audit? No. There are those basic steps that you need to follow. The first step, ladies and gentlemen, is for Howard to decide whether or not she's going to accept that appointment. So in this case here, the first procedure is to accept the appointment if she's interested. Listen and listen to me very well. Accept the appointment if in this case here, if the lady is interested in it. So when you are accepting the appointment, ladies and gentlemen, you must be bright. You must be very bright. When you are accepting the appointment, you must be very bright. Why am I saying you must be a bright person? Number one, you must consider a few things. Consider the independence of your firm. Consider the independence of your firm. Are you really independent enough? Are you independent enough? Right? Remember, independence is all about, in this case here, being objective. Shall you be able to really be very objective in this forensic investigation exercise that they're giving you? In this forensic investigation exercise that they're giving you. So remember, objectivity or independence, we are trying to look at you being detached from the organization. We are trying to look at you being detached from the directors, and of course, these employees of the firm. Are you independent enough? So remember, when you are independent, if this is the pendulum, then your pendulum should be able to swing to whichever direction. Don't say that these directors are, in this case here, the ones who are paying the piper, that have to sing to their tune. No, you have to be very objective, independent from them, so that should you collect sufficient evidence, in this case here saying that this fraud never took place, then ladies and gentlemen, I should be truthful enough and tell them, hey, you know what? It's this way. The evidence I collected shows nothing happened. If you are dependent on them, if you're going to sing their song, at the end of the day, you're going to pin wrong people, even at times for a fraud that never took place, So you must be independent. And remember, we can only say that you are independent if you are good to go in terms of what here the independence frauds. I know that you guys are quite good. You know what independence frauds are? Not frauds, but threats. Independence threats, sorry. So independence threats, remember, we normally use the acronym SAFIS. Like that, independence threats. So of course, the first one is what we call the self-interest threat. The second one is what we call the advocacy. The third one is what we call the familiarity. And then we have what we call the intimidation. And then of course we have what we call the self-review threat. Now, self-interest, ladies and gentlemen, this of course happens when you have some interest in this particular investigation that is happening. Assuming that one of these directors, or rather one of these perpetrators who is being accused is your friend, then you have an interest in the matter. Right? You have an interest in the matter. So self-interest ensures, and gentlemen, that you really do not have any interest in the matter whatsoever, so that it will be fair enough. It will be fair enough, this particular exercise, when you're given to undertake it, right? And then we have what we call advocacy. Advocacy, if you have ever promoted, or championed the interest of your client, maybe outside there, right? Or even within this organization. So perhaps one day you are here saying that this finance director is a very nice guy, he's doing a very good job. So if you have ever promoted some position regarding a particular person, regarding a particular situation, ladies and gentlemen, and then now later on you're being called to come and do an investigation, there is no way you'll be independent. Already in this case, you took sides. People already know that you are here. You are here. So there is no way later on when you discover you are, or when you try to gather sufficient audit evidence, and you realize that this person stole, if you come to us and tell us etc., or rather if you tell us that this man is good, we'll say, after all, this person, in this case here, they started working together long time. After all, this person has been saying very positive things about this perpetrator. So advocacy is all about you having, ladies and gentlemen, defended some position. For example, you went and said outside there, even on the media, that this company is so good, etc. So automatically you'll be considered to be the company's what here advocate. Now listen to me very well. The next one is the familiarity, where, for example, because of, ladies and gentlemen, because of the auditing, normal auditing that Hawa here has been doing in this particular institution for so long, should you, in this case here, undertake another job? Should you undertake another job? You know, forensic investigation is a different engagement. You may realize that now you start interacting with this director so often. And through these interactions, of course, your familiarity is going to be impaired. You'll be so familiar with these people. When you become so familiar with these people, it is your independence that will be impaired. Because now once you have become so familiar with them, so you become like family. And once you become like family, then you will not be independent. You would want to defend the position of these directors, for instance, so that at the end of the day, you end up crucifying people who are not supposed to be crucified, people who are as white as what here as cotton wool, right? So we have the concept of family. Familiarity is that aspect of being, or rather staying together for a long time, or doing so many things with these people until you get to talk so much. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, an auditor or an investigator should be able to exercise what we call professional skepticism, where you doubt everybody. That is what helps. And once we become so familiar with each other, chances are I will not be that objective. I will not be independent. Now, from there, ladies and gentlemen, we have the concept of what here, intimidation. Intimidation is where we have now what we call, where we shall be under undue pressure to produce some particular type of outcome. Right? Remember, like the other day, we had this music copyright. Music copyright was being audited by who? By Ronalds and Associates. It's a practical case. You can even Google it up. So there was a lot of pressure for the auditor to give a particular type of what an outcome. The directors wanted this auditor to go and say, hey, there wasn't any fraud, right? Remember, these were their normal auditors. Their normal auditors who had been given what here, an extension, would have been given an extra work of doing forensic investigation, right? So should you feel really that the pressure you are getting is too much to lean on some particular outcome, you need to know that that one will compromise your independence. Your independence will be what here will be impaired. You would rather not accept that particular appointment. Or if you are already in it, consider doing what here is resigning. Consider resigning. So then we have self-review. Self-review, ladies and gentlemen, normally how does it happen? This self-review, when, for example, you are doing the normal audit, you are, of course, in this case, you're producing what we call working papers. working papers. So, for example, we produced a working paper regarding the payroll in the previous periods. And then later on, you're told in this case that there is this particular fraud, the payroll, there is this particular fraud payroll scheme that has been happening. So you may be forced, ladies and gentlemen, here to retrieve some of your working papers that you had produced earlier on. And then here you are trying to relook at them. So even if there are errors that you got into yourself, now that you are reviewing your own work, ladies and gentlemen, there is no way you should be able to disclose, because who would want to make a fool of themselves outside there? Nobody. And even chances are you may not even be able to look at them critically because you are looking at your own work. Right? You may not be that skeptical as you're required here by this great profession here to be, because you're looking at your own job, right? So there is that threat of what yourself review. So you're saying, ladies and gentlemen, that the first thing that you're supposed to do before you accept your appointment, you must ensure that you are going to be objective. Remember, this is a very serious assignment. Don't go for it purely because of what here, the money aspect. No. Go to this knowing that they are very serious what here, like now this intimidation threat. Remember, now you're going to engage in an exercise where fraud is involved. There are fraudsters. You know, fraudsters, like for example, in our Kenya government, if you're given a job to go and try to investigate, like now what is happening in KTDA, there is forensic investigation happening at KTDA. I'm so sure the auditors there, I mean, it's quite crazy. Intimidation must be crazy there. Right? So don't just go accepting an appointment for the sake of it. Please look at this. Like now, self-interest threat also. You have been given some extra work. It means what here? Extra money. There is an interest there. There is extra fees you're going to be paid. How does this self-interest arise there? Remember, with this extra money, you're going to be over-dependent in this single organization, because now you're going to draw lots of income from one client. When you draw lots of income from one client, automatically a self-interest threat arises. Why? Because in the future, for example, these guys will come and tell you, the directors, we want us to say that this person stole money. If you don't say like that, they're going to fire you. So it means, ladies and gentlemen, because you've got an interest in form of audit fees and investigation fees that you're drawing from this particular one client, chances are you have to sing their song, right? Where they tell you, you'll not even look for any evidence. So before you accept, ladies and gentlemen, this forensic investigation, always look at this. I know you guys know about this concept of reliance of income from one client. And that is why the law tells us that out of whatever income we are receiving, we should never receive more than 15%. 15% of our income, more than 15% of our income should never come from one client. So if, for example, we have got 3 clients here, A, B, C, there could be very many. Maybe out of our total income, A is giving us 10%. B is giving us, for example, 12% out of our total income. And then we realize that there is this client who is giving us, like, for example, 18% of our. This is so wrong. When you're getting a lot of income from one client, then that client becomes your father and mother. You should always be on your knees down telling them, hey, you guys are the best. You're the ones who are footing my bills in this business. Right? So to be having quite a big self-interest to ensure that this firm does not fire you. And of course, should you go ahead to give us a bad opinion regarding them, then they shall fire you. So self-interest, whenever you're accepting, in this case here, more work, self-interest comes. That is the first factor that you need to consider before you accept the appointment. Of course, there are also other factors. Factors like which ones here? Like, for example, do you have the required competence? Amongst your team members, do you have people who are knowledgeable about forensic investigations? Remember, here, forensic investigations is like you need some people who are as good as lawyers, because you have to prepare affidavits. When you shall be doing this interviewing, the fraudsters, for example, and other employees, you would want them to swear. So do you have that competence in the organization? Do you have that experience? And then, of course, among the factors that you need to consider, ladies and gentlemen, are the commercial water factors. Does this business make economic sense to you in terms of the income? When you look at the audit fees vis-a-vis the expenses you're going to incur, are you going to get some residual income? Are you going to get some profit out of this? Don't just accept jobs for the sake of it. No. You know, I have some friends outside here who are doing auditing, who are doing, for example, this KRA, bookkeeping. These guys will keep on running helter-skelter from this assignment to another assignment, and then we look at them. These guys are paupers. They don't even know how to price themselves up, right? So it's important that we look at this business. Is it really making any economic sense to us? So are we together, ladies and gentlemen, up to there? First of all, that is the first point. First point about, in this case here, the procedures to be followed. That we have to accept the appointment. And when you're accepting the appointment, there are many factors: the independence factor, commercial factor, do we have the knowledge, etc., 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 etc. Thank you. So then we go to the second step. So the second step, ladies and gentlemen, that we have here is you plan the investigation. So when you are planning the investigation, remember the biggest plan here is to scope the work. Understand the work that you've been given. Ensure that directors understand the work. Know, in this case here, who is going to the lead investigator. Put up your team. So ensure that, ladies and gentlemen, you are able to place what is required of you thoroughly, nicely, right? So that at the end of the day, you reduce the risk of giving a wrong conclusion. We don't want you, in this case, to let perpetrators go like that with a fraud that they have committed. And we don't also want to fix people for a fraud that they never, in this case here, got engaged in. So ensure that you plan your resources. You plan the investigation. Very important. So come up with an investigations plan in terms of resources, timings, extent, who will do what are your responsibilities. You scope the work. Very important. Number three, ladies and gentlemen, what do we have here in number 3? Of course, in this case here, once I've scoped the work, I know now I'm supposed to start, in this case here, giving opinions. Before I do that, then I have to gather evidence. So when I'm gathering evidence, ladies and gentlemen, remember in this case here, the investigator should collect or gather sufficient, appropriate evidence, which should be able to be used in a court of law. Remember, the evidence that you're going to gather here is not your normal audit evidence. This is this is evidence which should be admissible in a court of law. Otherwise, you'll do whatever work you're doing there, you waste other people's resources, and then whatever you have been able to collect will not be taken to court, right? Will not be taken to court. So very important. From there, ladies and gentlemen, we go to the next one, which in this case here is now reporting to the appointing authority. So whatever conclusions you come up with, you must report to the appointing authority. Ladies and gentlemen, remember the people who gave you the assignment. You must call them into some meeting. Tell them that you guys gave me the job and here's your report. Give them a high-level summary. Give them, in this case, your documents that you would want them to go and read. Should they have any questions later, they should be able to call you again. So you must go back to the appointing authority, who could be the shareholders, directors, or whoever who gave you this job, to get your report. So report, in this case here, to the appointing authority. And then, of course, this appointing authority now will be able to go to the High Court or whichever court and place a case right there before a judge. It could be a normal case, or a case filed with certificates of what year agency, right? So at the end of the day, now once a case has been filed, you will be among the witnesses. You as a forensic investigator, now you must go and appear in a court of law to give what year the evidence that you have. And remember that that evidence, ladies and gentlemen, has to be what year, has to be of high quality. And that is why we say here you have to be very factual. If you know that you have no good evidence, during reporting your matter to the appointing authority, tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. Tell them that you know what? This case is not going anywhere. You will not win. Please don't lodge a case against these people. Don't lodge any case against these people. Great, ladies and gentlemen, we are told here court proceedings becomes the last thing. Now, from there we have procedures of accepting a forensic investigation. This is quite big. And then we have steps in investigating a suspected fraud. Quite similar, but I mean, when you're investigating this suspected fraud, what do? Number one, you determine the type of fraud. Is it a money laundering fraud? Is it a payroll? Scheme, fraud scheme. You must determine the type of fraud. Number two, consider how the fraud could have taken place. Consider the motives, etc. Right? So consider how the fraud could have taken place, e.g. usually by circumventing internal controls. Right? Number three, gather evidence. Gather evidence. Determine the identity of the perpetrators. Of course, when you are gathering evidence, you'll have to identify. It will help you to identify the identity of the perpetrators, the monetary value of the fraud, etc. Gathering evidence includes the motive for the fraud, the ability of the alleged fraudster to conduct the fraud, any attempt made by the alleged to conceal the crime, right? An examination of accounting records and other documentation, the use of computer-assisted auditing techniques, the CATs, of course, to discern the trends, etc. So gathering evidence includes you interviewing employees of the company, discussions with management. The most important thing when you're gathering evidence, this evidence, because it has to be admitted in a court of law, it must be sufficient and relevant. It must be sufficient and relevant. Very important, please, at the background, gather enough evidence. From there, please always give these fraudsters, these suspects, we call them suspects, by the way, for now, these suspects, give them an ear, right? You must also let them get a chance of giving you their side of the story. Remember, normally a story has got two sides, right? When party A is telling you that this and this is very, very bad, you may think that these other guys are what here? They are actually killers. But it's important that you also get to listen to them. You'll be surprised when this other party comes, these suspects come, when they explain themselves, you'll be surprised. These guys are not involved at all, in this thing. So in this case, ladies and gentlemen, when you are doing these forensic investigations, it will be very important for you to do what here? It will be very important for you to interview these suspects. And then number 5, produce a report for management, summarizing all findings, concluding on the identity of the fraudsters, and then the amount of the financial loss suffered. This report is also likely to be presented as part of evidence during court proceedings. It doesn't stop there. It will be very important for you to advise the management. It will be very important for you to advise the management such that in future, ladies and gentlemen, we will be able to have all the loopholes that were exploited sealed. Remember, it's all about strengthening what here? Internal control systems. It's about strengthening internal control systems. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would want us now to go back to this question of November 2015. November 2015, question number 5A, and then we try to see whether we could answer this in the few minutes that are remaining. And I hope you've not been taking notes, because I'll be able to share these notes with you. Great. So in this case, we have here November 2015. Question number 5 was quite an interesting question. Question number 5, I'll only read the requirement side. So part A, they wanted us to describe 3 objectives of a forensic investigation. Number 2, explain the procedure you'd follow to gather evidence on the suspected payroll fraud. On the suspected payroll fraud. And then we have here, assess how the code of ethics for professional accountants should be used in the provision of the forensic investigation services to Afro-Keen Manufacturers Limited. So now we are the ones answering this. We start with the first one. Describe 3 objectives of a forensic investigation. Now, I should really be very quiet on this. 3 objectives of a forensic investigation. 3 objectives. We've done that before, but please don't get tired. No. And please don't look at your answers. Just try to type there very fast. To decide if a fraud actually took place. I love that. 2. Always ensure that you start with the word 2. To quantify the financial loss. To quantify the financial loss. To discover the perpetrators. To produce evidence which will be used in a court of law. But now remember, the key word there is describe. So of course, I'll write those small objectives and then I'll try to speak through those objectives. I can add 1 or 2 sentences there, right? If, for example, it is about producing, in this case here, evidence, I'll speak about, for example, I'm trying to own up, right? That I would, in this case here, interview employees in the company, right? I will do blah, blah, blah to ensure that I'm able to collect high quality evidence that will be used in what here? In a court of law. So you must, ladies and gentlemen, in this case here, try to do what here to substantiate, because you're describing. That's very important. So we have in this case here, Nancy, to decide if a fraud occurred. I would want to do this because in most cases, remember, these are allegations. It could be true or not true, right? At times people live out of what here fear that there is theft happening. So it will be very important for me to gather sufficient, appropriate evidence to really make a decision, to really see whether this fraud took place. So you must try, ladies and gentlemen, in this case to expound on your objectives, because description means that you have to give like a paragraph. You can't have a paragraph only 1 sentence. It would be like 2 or even 3 sentences for you to be able to nail down. I like what Marietta is telling me there, to provide recommendations to the management regarding how the fraud took place, and of course regarding what here weaknesses in their ICS, in the internal control system, so that you can safeguard the same from not happening in future. So thank you very much. That is number 1. Number two, explain the procedures you'd follow to gather evidence in a suspected payroll fraud. What procedures would you follow in gathering evidence in this suspected payroll fraud scheme? Could you kindly help me out here? Mm-hmm. So how are we supposed to talk of the steps of forensic investigation? Determine the type of the fraud. They have already told you it's a fraud, it's a payroll fraud. obtain a list of employees of the company, which will be accompanied by salary ranges of employees, do recalculations to quantify the fraud, Now I'm seeing very good things here. I'm seeing very good things there. I'm seeing great things there. I'm seeing great things there. I'm seeing great things there. Doing background check on employees' files. Remember, these guys, ladies and gentlemen, they are quite specific. But they would want you to talk about, in this case here, what here the evidence, right? The steps, the procedures on gathering this particular this particular evidence on the payroll fraud. So what would you do like fast, what would I do? Like somebody has told me, for example, like obtain the various payrolls over the period. But this particular fraud, in this case here, happened, right? Very important. Try, in this case here, to get, apart from the payroll, I mean, do we have, for example, the contracts of these employees, right? If it is wages, what is, for example, the wages that are approved by directors, right? So somebody has told us there, when I'm trying, in this case here, to dig more, to be able to get this evidence, it will be very important that for us to do what here, to quantify, to recalculate the payroll amounts, right? As an audit procedure I will follow, I would even want to trace this particular amounts here to the vouchers, which were raised, and to the amounts paid at the bank, isn't it? At the bank. So if I'm the one doing this, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't really hurt anything by writing so much. I can even try to write how I was writing here, like the basic steps of what here are forensic investigations. And then I'll come and narrow down on the basic steps that I need to follow when now conducting a payroll fraud. When conducting a payroll fraud, right? Review the payroll, bank reconciliations, bank statements, etc. Do a physical check of employees against the amounts paid. At times, ladies and gentlemen, if it is wages and whatever, and you have those employees still on site, you can even decide in this case to do head counts, right? etc. So in the interest of time, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, I can see what Catherine is saying there. It all goes to the same thing. It all goes to the same thing. Even the overtime normally passes through the payroll. There'll be banks involved, etc. So they want us to assess how the code of ethics for professional accountants should be used in the provision of the forensic investigation service to African manufacturers. So they want us to look at the code of ethics. Code of ethics, we have got 5 principles there. Code of ethics, we've got 5 principles. Code of ethics, we've got 5 principles. Number 1 is independence. Number 2, we have integrity. Number 3, we have confidentiality. Number 4, we have professional behavior. Number 5, we have what we call professional competence. And due care. So professional competence and due care. So in terms of this, ladies and gentlemen, forensic investigations, it will be very important, for example, professionally, for this particular auditor to ensure that he or she is competent. Does she have the competence that is much needed to undertake this exercise? If she has that competence, then automatically we'll be able to say that he or she will take care. He or she will do the right thing. So that in this case here, this particular client of his or hers will not be able to even suffer more losses. Very important. Very important. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, under professional behavior, this forensic investigator, right, which in this case here is a profession well within ISPAC. How you behave in whatever that you do should be able to give credibility, more credibility to, should be able to give more credibility to ISPAC, should be able to give more credibility to ISPAC. So in short, don't get here and go to bed with these fraudsters, because if you go to bed with these fraudsters, at the end of the day, you are also a thief. That is misbehavior. At the end of the day, you'll find your name in the media. And once it goes there, then people will start saying, hey, that's how accountants behave. ISPAC members are not so nice. So you are denting the image of accountants in the industry like that. Confidentiality, ladies and gentlemen, of course, will be coming across quite secretive information. When you're doing this particular exercise, will be coming across secretive information. So you don't disclose that information to third parties without express authority of the appointing officers. Even in court, you can only go there as a witness when you're called upon the company that gave you the job. Right? You just don't start talking like anybody outside there. We are being called upon as accountants, as forensic investigators to ensure that we have this. And then we have lastly, integrity. Integrity is about straightforwardness. It's about honesty. Be very honest with your appointing authority. Tell your appointing authority, hey, this case that you want us to pursue will fall flat on its face. I mean, we don't have enough evidence. So be very honest. Very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. From there, we have the concept of what here, independence. Of course, this one, you can only nail this down very well when you talk about what here, the independence threats, using the concept of what here, Mr. Who? Mr. Msafi, Mr. Surface. And I've already been able to explain to you what surface means. So what surface means, ladies and gentlemen, remember, here we have the self-interest, advocacy, familiarity, we have intimidation, we have self-what here, self-review. Once you mention that, and remember you are describing this in paragraph format, then you will be able to get all the marks. Remember, students fail in this particular paper simply because they don't know how to structure their answers. They don't know how to structure their answers. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this. Very important, ladies and gentlemen. Nowadays, please, you don't need to go to anybody's physical class. Avoid physical classes as plague. They're expensive and, of course, ineffective at the end of the day. Just trust the online sources. Online, remember, ladies and gentlemen, way of teaching. Like, this video, you can post it, take notes you'd want to take, etc., etc. Things become what here, simple in the online platform. So remember, this is RCM Online College. We do not have any physical presence, but we are the biggest. We are the biggest online training institution that supports thousands and thousands of students across East Africa. So please, this is my YouTube channel. Ensure that you like it. Ensure that you like my posts. Comment on my posts. Ask questions there, right? And most importantly, subscribe. So thank you. I look forward to teaching you again in the near future. Should you, of course, want our services, don't, in this case, shy away from calling us.